Schuster Express on 1252 Sports Chicago. And now for your host, David Schuster.
And good evening and welcome in once again to my humble little podcast. In just a moment, I'm going to be joined by a friend of mine, a longtime cohort who I worked with at The Score. That's Dan McNeil. We'll bring him in just a moment. But before we get to anything else, I just want to do my normal recap of what's going on locally in sports. I was at the Bulls game at the United Center earlier today. It was an exciting game. DeMar DeRozan scoring a season-high 45 points. Joel Embiid, 40 for Philadelphia. And as the result of today's loss by the Bulls, that means that Billy Donovan is not going to coach the NBA All-Star game for the Eastern Conference. I don't think it's really that big a deal to him. I'm sure he's making enough money that, if he lost out any money on that, that's really not that big a deal. It was really interesting. After the game, DeRozan was asked, the trading deadline is coming up on Thursday. Does he think that the Bulls need to do something in order to get over the hump and maybe win a title this season, of which I don't think they're going to do no matter what? That's my opinion. And he correctly said, you know what, we have a lot of players that are injured right now. He mentioned Lonzo Ball, he mentioned Alex Caruso, he mentioned Patrick Williams, and eventually all those three players will come back, Ball and Caruso before Williams. So they'll get better as the season goes on. Again, I don't see them winning an NBA title the way they're currently constituted, but hopefully I can be proven wrong. Anyway, so that's a story on the Bulls. If you watch the NFL Pro Bowl game today, get your head examined. That's not football. That's all I'm going to say on that. That's just garbage. As far as the Bears, I'm going to say the same thing today that I said last week. I'm just not excited by anything that they're doing. They hired another junior executive as their general manager, just like they did with Ryan Pace. They hired another coach who has no head coaching experience, much like Matt Nagy was before he came to the Bears. So it's all about players in the NFL, and our guest coming up in just a couple of minutes, I'm sure he's got thoughts on that because he's a big football guy, of course. Cubs and White Sox, there's no baseball now, and there might not be baseball for quite a while. The two sides, they're like two petulant children, talking about the owners and the players. They just can't get their blank together. Eventually they will, because they know that they can't ultimately kill the golden goose, but we'll see on that. And then the Blackhawks, and Rocky Words is still a putz for what he did last week, and we'll talk to our guest about that as well. So without further ado, let's bring in that guest, Dan McNeil, who you can follow on Twitter at Danny Mac. What do you got there, buddy?
I am a football guy. This is my lucky hoochie. I need to pump some air in it, Shu. I can squeeze it. It's deflated. I could probably throw it a good 30 yards.
You and Tom Brady with deflated footballs. I love it.
Yeah, we often have been compared a lot, Tom Brady and me.
Yeah, well, you're carbon copies. You both have model wives, superstar model wives.
We both don't eat bread.
Okay, well, that's probably where it ends right there. Anyway, you can follow Danny on Twitter at DannyMac2021. Danny and I, it's really interesting, Danny, because we talked about this many times over the years. We were like ships in the dark. When I was at ESPN, you were at The Score. Then you went over to ESPN. I went over to The Score. Ultimately, you came back to The Score, of course, and we finally got to work together. And honestly, I was really thrilled by that because I've been one of your biggest fans, even when I wasn't one of your cohorts on, at the station, because I've always said this about talk show hosts, Danny, that some guys have it and some guys don't. And when I always say that somebody has it, I refer to them as being able to carry a tune, using a music analogy. And I always thought when you were doing a show, especially when you were talking about the things that you love, and that's hockey and football, you could keep my interest, whether information-wise or entertainment-wise. So you're one of the better, if not one of the best ones that has done sports talk in Chicago. I know I'm blowing smoke, but I really mean that.
That's very kind of you. Yeah, it was my goal from the very beginning to work with everybody in the business. So I kept shuffling my shoes. And when I wasn't getting fired, I ran away from radio stations. So I tried a few different things, and I worked with so many different people. And it did take us a while before our circles finally intersected. And there are some people like Bobby Skafish with whom I worked at 3 different radio stations, beginning at the AM FM Loop, and then at XRT and The Score. And then we worked together at The Drive for a very short period of time. He got fired from his afternoon drive job at The Drive shortly after they hired me in the winter of 2015. And, it's just you don't have to go too long or too far telling stories about radio to be reminded of how awful the business is. They fired Bobby Scafish, who's, one of the seminal rock and roll disc jockeys in Chicago in the last 30 years. I guess it's his fault. People were tired of ELO's Do Ya. It just didn't make any sense. But yeah, we worked together, and Bruce Levine and I worked together at a few different shops. And, I got nothing but affection for those who sail with me, to quote Eric Clapton. And that'll be the last time I quote Eric Clapton tonight.
Well, but you will be quoting Alice Cooper, because that's something you and I definitely have in common. And there was that famous time, where was it? House of Blues, I think. There, all of a sudden, we're watching Cooper, and I turned to my right. There you are. You were sitting on one of those high chairs, and I was standing, and it was pretty crowded that day. And actually, it's funny, Danny. I went back, I Googled it. It was I have it here somewhere. It was 2002. October 23rd, 2002. And I actually Googled it, and they came up with the set list.
Yeah.
There was 32 songs he played in that set list. I didn't recall it being that long, but I might have been, an altered state myself.
I didn't realize it was that many songs either. Usually 22 or 24 is about the full diet for any band or artist. But yeah, I wasn't sure if that was you. I'm looking at it, is it, because I didn't know you all that well in 02. And, you would have not been a suspect for me to bump into at the Alice Cooper show. Not many people really dig Alice Cooper, even guys our age. He didn't have the same passionate following the Rolling Stones or the Who or a lot of other bands had. But that's fine with me, and I love those bands too. But Alice Cooper is one of my rock and roll heroes. And he just celebrated a birthday on Friday. Yes. Coop turned 75.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And you finally got to meet him, and he came in studio, correct?
Well, I didn't meet him in studio. Matt Spiegel and I did an interview with him in 2012. And I put him on the spot, and he really dug the interview. I thought he really liked some of the chords we were striking, and I had just read his book, Golf Monster. In it, he talked about how he loved having someone in the group when he's playing golf who liked to send messages to slower groups in front of him. He said, I always want to get a guy in my group who hits it a little bit farther than I do so we can send a message to slow players. And I told him, I said, Alice, I'll be your message sender. I really want to play with you when you guys get to Chicago this summer. Tell me how big the check is I need to write. How many zeros do I have to put on a check to the charity of your choice to get on the golf course with you? And I put him on the spot. And to my surprise, the Callaway people called and said, Alice really loved the time he spent with you. He'd love to play with Dan. But it was on a 4th of July, which is a day for my family. It was in Milwaukee, and I would have been shot at the end of the day if I'd gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to Milwaukee to play 9 holes with Alice. It was hot and humid that day, and then trailer my boat 70 miles each way. I think it's about 60 miles each way to go to the lake where I take my son Patrick tubing on the 4th. So it just didn't work out. But I did meet him when I got to MC his show in Maryville in May of 2016, and that was one of my career highlights. I'm not kidding you. And now, I didn't stand on stage and say, ladies and gentlemen, here's Alice Cooper. But 10 minutes before he started the show, I went out and grabbed the microphone and made, announcements on upcoming shows, worked the crowd for just a couple of minutes, made a reference to Cold Ethel, who I had to go see in the green room. And then I got to spend some time with Alice after the show. And it was really, really cool because he's one of the few people I've really wanted to meet. It's as you learned interviewing sports dudes over the years, be careful on who your heroes are. Maybe you don't want to meet all of them, but Alice is the real deal, man. I love him. I love his music. It meant a lot to me as a kid. It means a lot to me today.
I really consider him a genius. First of all, a genius who knows how to make money. That's, those people are geniuses in themselves, but a genius in his industry. It's sort of like, it's overlooked, but certain members of the Three Stooges, Curly, okay, Jerome Howard, he was a genius. He didn't get the credit that he deserved, but he was a genius. And I consider Alice Cooper, and by the way, his real name, of course, is Vincent Fournier. Fournier am I pronouncing it correctly, Danny?
Yeah, Fournier.
Fournier.
He's a hockey player. You don't pronounce the second R. Fournier. Very nice. Yes, he's born in Detroit City, and he played guitar in a long-haired rock and roll band.
Yeah. Hang on to your Alice Cooper knowledge because it might come in handy at the end of this podcast. I'll forewarn you. Anyway, all right. So you mentioned that you've worked with a lot of people over the years. And of course, right off the bat, at least at the early days of the Score, and you were one of the originals, along with North and Brian Hanley, Tom Scher, Dan Jiggets, and of course, your partner in crime in the afternoon. That was Terry Boers, who I love to death. And you were known as the Heavy Fuel Crew. Give us some highlights. I mean, if you can capsulize all those great years with you and Terry together.
Terry originally started on a part-time basis with us when we fired up the transmitter on January 2 of 92. Terry wasn't convinced the business model was going to work, so he was continuing to write full-time for the Sun-Times, and he was kind of a utility writer at the time. They took away his column a few years before that. He was angry about that, but he still didn't trust sports radio. No one had ever tried it. It's a daytime-only operation. So I alternated between Terry and Brian Hanley. I was the most polygamous guy in Chicago radio, at least in the studio. And, occasionally we'd bring in Bill Gleason from the Daily Southtown or Kent McDill. I had to have somebody with me. I never liked doing it alone. And Terry came on board full-time in August of 92. And after about 8 months, and Mike Ditka in that first year was an enormous highlight. And Ditka was maniacal. He'd written off all local media. Other than after the games, he wouldn't talk to the media in Lake Forest. The media were all off limits. You didn't get Mike. He paid the fines the NFL slapped on him for it. But you'd get him on Tuesdays on the Score. And the 5 regular hosts, Scher, Jiggets, North, McNeil, and Boers, all traded who would sit with then co-host Mike Pyle and do the Ditka show. And Ditka hated Boers, and he didn't like me a lot of the time. You throw in the fact that he's 5-11 that year, on his way out the door, and I think he knew that was coming pretty early in the season. He was really surly, and I'm driving home in my little Ford Bronco, and I hear Ditka ask Terry, "Who you crapping?" And a light bulb goes on, and I think, hey, there's our weekly first organic segment. When someone is telling you a lie, you call and expose him. You give him a "Who you crapping?" And that segment was a signature staple at the Score for 20 years or so. Yeah. That was a highlight. Going to Seattle in 96 with the Bulls in the finals, even though the Bulls aren't really my thing. It was a great trip, hanging out, closing the hotel bar with Dan Patrick, Mike Tirico, Brent Musburger, and Terry Boers was a lot of fun. And, I was devastated when they broke us up in August of 99. I didn't think it was right, and I didn't think it was right to not have conversations with a guy who was there as the first employee. And that's who I was. I mean, I was there 4 months before we signed on, interviewing would-be producers. Here I am, not even 30, and I'm interviewing would-be producers and making recommendations for airships and building a sound library. I was owed a conversation about what was going on in their heads, but they didn't give it to me, and they made their changes. And about 15 months later, I split, hoping to get a gig at ESPN 1000, which ultimately I did.
All right, well, let's talk about that since you just brought it up. You were part of the 3-man crew, and I'm not going to ask you to go over the other people but a 3-man crew seems like on radio, much like on TV, one person too many. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, in my opinion. Well, there's no right or wrong. I like the gaggle. I like when more people are involved. I originally was horrified by the idea of it. Not only do I not want to do a 3-man show in May of 01, I don't want Harry Dynowitz to be anywhere near a live microphone. I didn't trust him to be an afternoon drive personality, and John Yurkovich started very slowly, and Harry pounced on his opportunity to try to be the number 2, and we clashed. And that show sucked for the first 18 months. But after a while, I became reliant on the third guy. With 3 guys, you almost always can have 2 guys engaged in a topic. If 2 guys are just playing ping pong with each other, maybe one of them's not having a great day. Maybe one of them doesn't like the content. You can find that content partner in the other guy, hopefully. Take, for example, horse racing. I didn't know jack about horse racing. Both Harry and Yurko did. They got me interested in it eventually, but I was fine with them talking about it in the early years because I didn't know anything. Harry didn't know anything about fishing. Yurko and I would talk fishing. Auto racing, I would engage Yurko on that on occasion because I do have some hillbilly blood in me and know a little bit about auto racing. It doesn't thrill me, but I know the sport a little bit, or at least did at that time. So you can always find somebody. And with music, Harry and I, you can always find somebody to talk to about something that interests you. With 2 guys, it doesn't always work that way, and things fall dead if one of the guys isn't interested. Ask Danny Parkins about what it's like to work with me when the topic is pro basketball. Yes. I flag very quickly in the conversation because it's not been something I've wanted to do for a long time.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're very honest with your opinion on that subject. I mean, let's face it, you're synonymous with football, of course, of what you played once upon a time yourself, and of course hockey, which I think is your ultimate love, even maybe more so than football. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but you've always said over the years that basketball just doesn't do anything for you. It happens to be the one sport that I love more than probably any other, but that's fine as long as you're honest with your thoughts. Again, you were so good in the sports that you love, Danny, that it just carried through, in my opinion.
Thanks. I appreciate that. The NFL is my favorite league. I love watching pro football. Bums me out. We only have one more game to go. And I guess before that game kicks off, I'll get my head examined because I did watch some of the Pro Bowl today.
I'm sorry.
You bastard. What are you saying? So the NFL is my favorite league, and the Chicago Blackhawks are my favorite team. I had a tough week this past week, given where both of those entities are right now. The NFL, and I knew this was coming when David Culley got fired from the Texans after just 1 year, and rightfully so. Black head coaches get such a short leash in that league. And Brian Flores didn't have the time he should have had in Miami. There also was a disagreement with his owner on the quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. Mm-hmm. But Steve Wilkes in Phoenix just a couple of years ago with the Cardinals, he gets popped after 1 year. It's unjust that in a league which has a 78% African-American workforce that only 1 or 2 guys are black. I don't like that. I don't like that the integrity of the game is being compromised by owners who would rather have higher draft picks than wins and offer head coaches incentives for losing games. And that ultimately is going to be very interesting because we're talking about federal law. We're talking about the feds getting involved and examining on a very, very, thorough level the legitimacy of the league I love. So those things bugging me this week, and then the town meeting gone awry hosted by Rocky Wirtz, or not hosted by Rocky Wirtz, but Rocky stealing the show and not in a good way, just made me feel very, very sad.
Yeah, let's take both of those things one at a time. Obviously, Flores came out with his lawsuit, and it was very quickly countered, if you will, not with a counter lawsuit, But you saw John Elway say that, he defended himself, that all the things that he was accused of, along with his organization, were not true. The Giants said the same thing. The Miami owner said that, he did not offer that money. So it's he said, obviously. What do you think ultimately happens there?
I have no idea what's going to happen with any of that, but the Rooney Rule has been something that has every year I would have to assume there are candidates interviewed, because what are there usually? 6, 7 openings a year? This year we had 9, I think. There's usually 6 a year at least. So those are 6 teams that have to do interviews with minorities. No one will tell me that at least one of those isn't done as a cursory interview that is not being taken seriously by the team that's looking for a head coach. And I know for a fact there have been coaching candidates, one in Chicago in particular, a minority candidate who was flown to Chicago in coach for an interview for the Bears head coaching position. Now, do you think when Bill Belichick leaves that Robert Kraft is going to do anything shy of sending his private jet to the greatest coaches of all time successor? That's how you operate when you're a classy operation, and the Bears don't do it that way. And there's a lot of teams that have that attitude, and it wouldn't surprise me if Denver's guilty of this and other teams that go through the motions because they have to and have absolutely no desire to hire that guy. But how do you prove that? I mean, that therein lies the rub. How do you prove that somebody wasn't a legitimate candidate?
First of all, I'm surprised that the Bears didn't do it via Amtrak or even Greyhound, to be honest with you. All right, let's move on to the town hall, because honestly, that was embarrassing like no tomorrow. And what was really just compounding everything is that Danny Wirtz was just about to answer with a politically correct answer to the question, I'm sure, along with, forgive me, I forget her name already, who's now in charge of business operations, the president for the Hawks. She would have handled it because they're both savvy. But then Rocky Wirtz just sabotaged the whole thing, and instantly he turned into his father. That's what I saw, and a lot of other people saw the same thing. And all the good that the Hawks have tried to do, behind the scenes or on the surface, it just went down the shitter right then and there.
It was nothing short of shocking how off the tracks that thing went. And I always have liked Rocky. Rocky always had been very kind to me. It is my want to like people, not dislike them. Man, I couldn't believe, and you're right. I mean, it did seem like Bill Wirtz, who was vilified again when people talked about him this week because of Rocky, and people who may never have met Bill Wirtz wanted to speak authoritatively about how bad of a guy he was. He wasn't a bad guy. Bill Wirtz was one of the most misunderstood figures in Chicago sports history. He just made a lot of bad business decisions, like putting his team's goddamn games on television. That was a bad business decision. He was loyal to a fault. But I'm getting off topic here. I would have hoped that Rocky would have been progressive enough to recognize the errors of their ways and be sensitive to the victims. And if he didn't want to respond to Mark Lazarus or Phil Thompson, at least have son Danny handle that portion of it, because he clearly doesn't possess the smarts, frankly, to be addressing that. He doesn't have the awareness in a more, and fortunately, sensitive society than it used to be about what happened with Kyle Beach and what may have happened to other players.
Yeah, what really struck me when he just all of a sudden took over right then and there, a lot of times when people get older, they lose their filter. And that's exactly what I saw happening right then and there. He lost his filter. Unfortunately, a lot of his real feelings started to come to the surface. And I'm sure he's still pissed off about the money that they've probably had to pay out of their own pocket And there's probably more to come out of their pocket because other people are going to sue them from what happened 10 plus years ago. So he's still PO'd about all that. And like I said, I think his filter just came off, and he came across as such an asshole, to be honest with you. And we'll see if they can recoup. But let's talk about the product on the ice as well, Danny, because let's face it, this season got off to like an all-time thud. Jeremy Colleton, I don't know if he's a good coach or not, although he's now coaching, I guess, at the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken, the Canadian team or something along those lines. But it was a disaster from the word go. Derek King has done as best as he can. I guess he's a little bit of a calming influence, but Kane and Taze are not the players that they were. Certainly Taze isn't anymore. Kane, I don't know. I think, honestly, Danny, you tell me. I think Kane has been sort of gypped over the years because he's a Hall of Fame, of course, kind of player. But if they would have kept him with the same line mates as opposed to changing his line mates almost every single year, and I just think that has sort of undercut even how much greater he would have been if he would have had great line mates continually along with him on the same line.
I think there's some merit to that. I don't know if I would go so far as to say gypped.
Maybe
But
that's the wrong word.
What's that?
I said maybe that's the wrong word.
Well, would he have had more impressive numbers than he has even already? Probably. Patrick Kane has had some of the best hands in hockey I've ever seen. And when you have great goal scorers playing on the same line with guys who have that playmaking ability with their hands, I likened him. Now, he was more of a scorer than Adam Oates was with the St. Louis Blues years ago. But when Brett Hull was scoring 70 and 80 goals in a season, in that era of hockey when that was common, Adam Oates was the guy who was putting the puck on his tape because he was so good, and they played together for a long time. Patrick Kane needed a guy like that. I think if he would have played with a guy like that, you would have seen some 90 assist, 100 assist seasons, and he didn't quite get there. I thought Alex DeBrincat was going to be that guy. And I don't know where they are with Alex DeBrincat right now, but he hasn't really consistently played at that level so many were projecting him to be playing at. Now, I have to confess this, though. Full disclosure, Shu, I have not watched hockey this year very much at all. I read about the Hawks on my phone. I see the highlights. I just turned 60 in August, and when you're on the back nine of life, you don't have time for a lousy product, and that's what they've had for the last couple of years. They're not going to the playoffs, and I know this will disappoint some of your listeners and viewers, but I say what's going on, and without fear of retribution, I won't watch them when they're that bad. If that makes me a bad fan, guilty as charged. I just don't have time for it anymore.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I've always said this, Danny, and I love all sports, but basketball has always been my favorite. But if all sports are played to their zenith, to their best possible, hockey is the best. Hockey is just the most exciting. And obviously them winning the 3 Stanley Cups was a highlight for all of us that we'll never forget. But I go back to even those teams when Gretzky was winning all those Stanley Cups, the Hawks had great teams. And if it wasn't for Edmonton, they probably would have won a couple of cups then as well. Hockey has just been always one of the best sports to watch when it's played well.
Yeah, in person, there's nothing like hockey. And you remember how fun it was on that 180-foot ice surface at the old Chicago Stadium, and you watch contrasting styles like the best Blackhawks team that never won the cup in our lifetimes, the 90-91 team that finished with 106 points when 106 points meant something. They won the President's Trophy, got punched out in the first round by the Minnesota North Stars, but that was a team that would just dump it in, plaster your face against the glass, dig out loose pucks and center it in front and cram the net and crease area and try to get greasy goals, as they say. They weren't pretty, but they were physical and they were consistent. And they did have a sniper in Jeremy Roenick. It wasn't like they didn't have some skilled players, but they weren't the Edmonton Oilers. My goodness, you look at those Oilers teams of the 80s, they're 6 players deep, I would think, in Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. The goaltender Grant Fuhr's in the Hall of Fame, and he was one of the weakest links on their team. He could give up 4 goals a game because they were going to score 8. Gretzky, Messier, Glenn Anderson, Yari Curry. Who am I missing? Mike Kruzhelnitsky.
Coffee.
On the blue line, you had Paul Coffey. You had Kevin Lowe on the blue line. Charlie Huddy was their 4th defenseman, man. You put Cowboy Huddy on most teams in the league, he's number 2.
Yeah, I thought the Hawks were so good back then, but they were half a stride behind Edmonton, and they just never could beat them. It was really amazing. All right, so you mentioned Alice Cooper earlier on as one of your all-time passions, but I know you have 2 other passions that you really love, and that's both golf and fishing. So let's start with fishing, because I share that with you as well. I'm nowhere near the expert you are on the lakes and on any other body of water. Give us some of your best all-time fishing stories, Danny.
My favorite freshwater fish I ever caught was and I don't count it as a 50-inch muskie boated, because the league office has ruled no goal. Here's why. We were walleye fishing. We were fishing in 25 feet of water for walleye on walleye tackle. I've got 8-pound test and a 7-foot rod, nothing too hardy to battle those big fish. And after I set the hook on a walleye in 25 feet of water, I immediately felt a wham, thump. A muskie got the walleye. He T-boned the walleye, and I didn't see the muskie for a good 15 minutes. My guide kept the boat right on top of the fish. We stayed vertical. Otherwise, she would have unspooled me. I mean, those things take off, and I'm not going to, because you can't fight with that light of line. You have to let it wear itself out. Right. And I have no idea if this fish is hooked or if it just has the walleye in its mouth. We see that it wasn't hooked. It's just got the walleye T-bone. When we finally get it up about 10 feet below the surface in that clear water in Ontario, which is not always great for fishing, by the way, but this part of Eagle Lake, Portage Bay, is very clear water. I like to fish the cloudier water, actually. But it took about 25 minutes before we finally got this thing in the net. And freakishly, when it spit the walleye out, the hook from the walleye bait, the minnow hook for the walleye, got up in the muskie's mouth and kept the fish on for just a few seconds for us to get her in the bag. And she was 50.5 inches, not a real thick fish, but it was amazing. It was just so much fun because we knew it was a pig, and we knew we had to wait her out, and I had to be patient and don't jerk the rod and don't snap off by being impatient. Let her tire out, and it was just so much fun. It was a blast. That's probably my favorite freshwater story.
All right, so hang on to all your fishing information, because that also will come in handy at the end of this podcast. Now, you're notorious, and I hate to use that word, but you're famous for taking a trip at least once a year up north across the border up into Canada, whether Ontario. Have you gone up to any other provinces up there to do any fishing?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, I'll give you my fishing story up in Canada, and I'm going way, way back. I was 16 years old, 1972, and I'm with my father, a good friend of mine, and his father. My father didn't really do anything sports related, and certainly he wouldn't know a fishing reel from anything else, but he did it for me. So God bless him and his memory. So we went up, we flew to Winnipeg, we took a bush plane from there, another couple of hours north, and we were way, way, way up there at this point. And the water was crystal clear. I mean, you could literally dip your head over the boat and start drinking the water. It was that clear and that pure. And walleyes, and I had never gone walleye or northern fishing before, and it was the best. I had never even had a shore lunch until that time. It was the most, I'm almost going to use the word orgasmic experience, but it was one of the great, it was one of the great experiences of my life to do that. And we were catching, 6, 7, 8 pound walleyes. And and my friend's father caught a 26-pound northern that was actually spawning. So by the time we got it back into shore later on and weighed it again, it lost like a bunch of water weight, or if you will. So, I mean, that was just one of the best experiences of my life. So I can totally identify when you go up north into Canada. I've never gone muskie fishing. What is the difference between muskie fishing and even northern fishing?
Well, northern, you can catch pretty much on anything. You can catch northern pike when bass fishing, they'll eat anything. You fix some hooks to a beer can, it'll bite it. They're a cousin of the muskellunge, part of the Esox family. Northern aren't very smart. They don't get quite as big, but boy, they are so good to eat. And everybody talks about walleye being such a sweet, easy to eat, not fishy fish, and that's all true. But for me, I'll take a northern pike for eating. But the muskie is the fish of 10,000 casts. Or is it 1,000? Yeah, it's 1,000. Minnesota's the land of 10,000 lakes. The muskie is the fish of 1,000 casts. Because every time I catch one, I say, all right, only 990 more throws to go. Because that's what it takes sometimes. I went to Canada three times in 1 year and didn't boat a fish.
Wow.
Now, one of those trips wasn't a muskie trip. It was before muskie season. Muskie season always in Ontario opens the third Saturday in June. I was up there Memorial Day weekend, right after the Hawks lost to the Kings in the Western Conference Finals in 2014. I was so bummed out over that.
That was a great series, by the way.
Oh, it was a great 7-gamer, and they just couldn't. What was it, Jeff Carter? They just couldn't keep him out of the crease, so I went up there to get drunk for a few days and forget about the Hawks getting punched out and do some smallmouth and walleye fishing. But 2 more trips and didn't boat a muskie. You have to have enormous patience. It requires a lot of physical strength and endurance. If I'm not fit, and there are times when I'm not, believe it or not, David, I'm not as effective of a muskie fisherman. The last summer, I wasn't in the best physical shape, and my son and I went on a hot day to a lake about 85 miles from where we live in Northwest Indiana. And I told him at the 2-hour mark, I said, I got to take a 20-minute break. I'm not fit for this, because you're constantly throwing and winding. It's heavy tackle, heavy gear. There's no sitting around drinking beer. It's a good weed sport because it keeps you going. If you're one of those who, when not you figuratively, anybody, if you're a person who likes to get up and do things when you smoke pot like I do, I don't just fall into the couch. I like to clean the garage or catch muskies. It's perfect activity for that. So I love it because it's so rare when you get one, and you can go from zero to hero very, very quickly. And a lot of the action's at the boat too. And when you have a 48-inch fish that has a 23-inch girth and weighs 40 pounds, strike you wildly right at the boat, there's nothing like that in freshwater fishing.
Can you catch muskies while trolling, or is it all casting?
No, you can troll for muskie. And I have to add that to my game because I'm getting older. And because I don't have the strength to throw all day. I don't like that I've had to add that to the game, but if it keeps you on the water longer, that's a good thing. And I'm just learning trolling techniques via my guy Muskie Pete in the Northwoods of northwestern Wisconsin. He's a tremendous guide on the Chippewa flowage, where I've stayed 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. He's teaching me how to troll, but I would prefer to throw for them.
Fair enough. All right. Well, one other passion that we both share, and you're a much better golfer. I'm a hacker, but I still love it. What do they say? A bad day on the golf course beats any good day in the office, which is true, as long as you're out in nature. And some of the golf courses are just so beautiful. But give us one of your best golf stories, because I know you like pounding that ball.
Oh, yes, I do. I used to hit it a long way. That changed probably 7 or 8 years ago. when a series of injuries began to hobble me. I ruptured my left biceps tendon and didn't get it fixed within the window. So my left arm has about 20% of the strength of my right arm. So I've had to make some adjustments there. It's not fixable now, and there's really not much I can do to get it stronger because the biceps tendon is in two pieces. It's severed. It was a complete rupture. I should have gotten it fixed in 14. But I can't hit it a long way. I live for that next moment, just that next opportunity to do something great. And my scorecard doesn't matter to me as much as it once did. Probably my favorite golf memory in recent years would be in Arizona at Eagle Mountain, just 3 years ago now, when I had just lost $50 to Danny Parkins on the hole before on a par 3. We're playing closest to the hole. And we're then on a par 5. And I hit a nice drive. Don't hit it 300 anymore like I used to, but I knocked it 280 yards in the middle of the fairway. I'm 237 yards to the green. And the green is elevated and guarded by tiered bunkers. There are tiered bunkers from the middle to the right side of it. And I said to Parkins, double or nothing, I'm on. From 237 yards, double or nothing, I'm on the green. Now, I've been on the green from 235, 240 yards into a few times in my life, but to be willing to throw $50 out there and say, yeah, I'll be on. Well, what are the chances of that? I knocked that son of a bitch 10 inches from the hole and tapped in for eagle. And we have it on video, actually. Brian Gertz, who was out on that trip in Arizona with us, was rolling on that. And you hear Parkins, he does a Dick Enberg after it starts to leave. He goes,
oh my.
He gave a real crisp, oh my. And the video is so cool because we can't see how close it is. We don't even know if it's on the green till we drive up because it was elevated. And we're starting to turn around, and I look down to my right because we're above the green, actually, where the cart path took us to. And I looked down there, and I said, my God, I can't believe almost double eagled that hole.
Which is, it's called an albatross, is it not? When you get a 2 on a 5?
It might be. I've never been in that territory.
Yeah, I think it is. I think a 2 on a 5 is called an albatross, if I'm not mistaken. Not that I even know what an albatross is. By the way, was that a 3-wood or a 5-wood from 237?
3-wood, yeah. A 3-wood, yeah. A 5-wood. I don't even own a 5-wood.
I do.
I own a 5-wood.
I do, and honestly, we'll play someday semi-soon. When I'm out in the fairway, instead of hitting like a 5-iron sometimes, because I have more confidence in my woods, so I'll choke up more so on a 5-wood from about 170 and use that instead. That's just my game. I play the game the wrong way, but it's still fun for me. No,
whatever way works for you. I hit long irons better than I hit, like everybody loves the hybrid or the 5-wood. I don't feel comfortable with them, so I'll take an iron to it. If you can hit a 3-iron 200 yards, why mess around with another club?
Absolutely. All right, we got 2 more segments here. Appreciate of course, you joining us today, Danny, and it's good seeing you and talking to you. I want to do a segment that we do called Walk Down Memory Lane. And obviously, all the years that we've both been in broadcasting and covering sports, there's so many memories, but I have one that stands out with you in mind. And it was during the Stanley Cup. And I was reminded this by the passing of our cohort, Les Grobstein, who was sitting up in the upper echelon. And I think this was in Boston for Game 6, and they're losing 2-1. Or maybe it was in Philadelphia when they won, but I think it was in Boston. Anyway, it was you, him, and Speegs were sitting way up on the ceiling area, and then they scored the 2 goals. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, Matt Spiegel and I had the pleasure of Les's company both in Philadelphia and in Boston. And knowing how much Les enjoyed hockey made that fun for me because, Les being 9 years older than I, he had even suffered more than I had. So I appreciated that. But yeah, it was in Philly. You know, when Kane scores that goal, we had no idea what happened. Just like anyone watching on television or most of the people in the rink, I look at Spiegel, I look at Les, and it's like, why is Brent Seabrook throwing his stick and gloves in the air? What the hell just happened? And it took so long for them to get us downstairs, us media, and get near a television to finally see a replay, because we were allowed to go out on the ice. And I abused the credential. I didn't go down there to interview people. I went down there to shake hands and take a few pictures with people I either knew and admired, like Pat Foley or Duncan Keith, and same thing in Boston. But yeah, Spiegel missed 17 seconds in Boston. And the Hawks were playing like shit. I mean, this thing's going 7. We're late in the third period. Boston had been out playing them all night. And, man, you get 2 goals. On the second goal, Spiegel's on his phone texting. And I said, dude, they're going to win the cup. They're going to win the cup. Poland just scored the game winner. They killed the last 10 or 20 seconds, whatever was left. What an amazing ride that was. Now, you covered both of those on the road, did you not?
Yeah, I was going to refer to that because you guys were doing your show from whatever bar. I remember in Boston, you were across the street from where the Bobby Orr statue was. It was right across the street, if I remember correctly. In Philly, it was a little bit further down, but it was a nice bar restaurant. And I would go to either the practice or the morning skate and come back. And you were always enamored that I could play all those multiple cuts real quickly on the air along with you. So yeah, those were great, great, great times.
Oh, the triple cut. Yeah, you would give me some triple cuttage. I got a trivia question for you.
Okay.
Because you're not a hockey guy. And I had to think when somebody asked me this question recently, but I did get it right. As a guy who was in all of those post-game news conferences and news conferences after practices, can you name either the Flyers or the Bruins head coach?
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh.
It's hard, isn't it?
You'll say the names and it'll, quickly come back into the recesses of my mind, but off the top of my head, I can't. I honestly can't.
The Flyers were coached by Peter Laviolette.
That's right.
And the Bruins were coached by Claude Julien. And it's spelled Claude, but he's a Frenchman, so we call him Claude. He is Claude Julien. Yeah, I had to think about it. It took me a while to pull both of them. Actually, I remember Julien, but it took me a while to get the Flyers.
And you know what, Danny? You said you didn't see the puck go into the net when Kane. I mean, they lined us up because it was going into overtime. And, if the Hawks won, we were going to go on the ice. So they lined us up in the hallway, off the ice, about 100, 200 yards away. I didn't see it going either. There was a little 13-inch black and white TV that one of the camera people had on the floor. And so when they finally went in and they figured it out, they lined us up to go out there. And, they did the little party on the ice before they let us on. The first person I talked to in Philadelphia, I don't know if you remember this, was Dan Quinn, the lieutenant governor, because I had to get somebody on the air to make myself worthwhile, if you will. And he was so gaga about the whole thing. And then we went on and we talked to all the players. And then the same thing in Boston. In Boston, they were losing 2-1, going into the last minute and a half or whatever it was. So we went down to the Hawks locker room, and we were standing outside thinking that we're going into the losing locker room. And I didn't see either of those 2 goals either. And then all of a sudden they score the 2 goals, then they bring us back out to the ice, and, the same thing, deja vu all over again. And those are some of the great thrills. I mean, when the White Sox won down in Houston, when the Cubs won in Cleveland, the Hawks winning in Boston and Philadelphia, I got on the field or on the ice for all those things. Those are my treasured memories that I'll, treasure the rest of my life.
Yeah, we're lucky if we can say as grown men, it still accesses us to being a wide-eyed child. And obviously you have that emotion when you reflect on these things. And with the Blackhawks, I certainly had them also. And now, that we have some distance between where we are today and where we were when we were cutting our teeth, some things take on an even greater significance and make you have even more gratitude for the things you've seen. Like, being on the sidelines for the Fog Bowl.
Yes.
That's incredible. You could be watching NFL films, and my sons aren't big sports fans, but they had the greatest name games on in an NFL films, 10 games. The Sea of Hands with the Raiders and I think the Steelers. Immaculate Reception, same two teams. The Catch, Dwight Clark, and there's the Fog Bowl. And, they've got this video, and my son, Van, is watching this, and he goes, man, how did they play? I said, Van, I was standing right down there on the field. We couldn't see in the press box, and in that era, that was New Year's Eve of '88. There were only 50, 75 people in that press box, and because you didn't have a million websites and a million people covering. So they invited a lot of us down to the sideline, and I was standing at the pylon in the north end zone on the Bears sideline, the northwest corner, and watching Reggie White throw Tom Thayer and Jay Hilgenberg, buddies of mine, around like a redheaded stepchild. I'm like, hey, those are friends of mine. Quit doing that. He was an animal. Those are some amazing memories, some of the stuff we've seen.
Oh, 100%. And as I say to a lot of people, someday I'm going to be in a nursing home or something. And I'm going to say, oh, I knew Michael Jordan. And the guy next to me is going to say, will you increase this guy's meds because he's just babbling like no tomorrow. The Fog Bowl. And I was down there also on the field. We started upstairs and we came down there. You literally could not see halfway across the field. You couldn't see anything. I don't know how they played, to be honest with you. I have no idea.
Yeah, visibility wasn't more than 25, maybe 30 yards. It's 53 yards sideline to sideline, and we couldn't see the Eagles sideline from the Bears side of it when it was at its thickest. And not many balls were thrown long that day. Randall Cunningham actually posted some pretty good numbers against the Bears that day. The Bears did not play particularly well, but they managed to come out of there with a win and then got their asses kicked in cold weather the next week by the 49ers.
Bear weather. Bullshit.
Bear weather. Bear
Bullshit.
down.
All right, we come now to our final segment. It's our trivia segment. And Alan, who's our producer, I think he's got a little bit of sponsor he's going to play right here before we get to the questions, Danny.
All right.
Hello, this is Paul from Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. We are located at 1026 South State Street in historic downtown Lockport, Illinois. We are very excited to be partnering up with the Fat Mike Chicago Sports Show, as well as the 1252 brand, because we are one of the few Chicagoland breweries that embrace sports and sports culture. Come in for a fresh brewed beer made right here in Lockport while catching the game of your favorite team. Stay for the live music that we have booked every weekend, or just come for a cozy atmosphere to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, loved one, or complete stranger. Nick and Ivy makes you feel right at home no matter what the occasion is. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. Visit our website for our up-to-date tap list or to go shopping on our online store at nickivybrewing.com. That's Nikivy brewing.com. Come in today for a fresh brewed beer born and raised in Lockport, Illinois.
And our thanks to Nick and Ivy for their sponsorship here. And this is our trivia segment, Danny. And like I said earlier, I tailored a lot of these questions for you. So you can imagine where I'm going with some of these. And we're going to start right off the bat. The first one, and we talked about Alice Cooper earlier on. And much like the Traveling Wilburys, who do they have in the Traveling Wilburys? They had George Harrison. Who else did they have in that?
I'm not familiar with the act, frankly.
All right. Well, anyway, it was George Harrison and a bunch of other people that Jeff Lynne, who was in there as well, and some other people. But Alice Cooper did the same kind of thing. He got together with a bunch of other people. And do you remember they had sort of like a super band? This is in 2012. Do you recall this?
I have a vague memory of it, and I will remember some of the participants when you say them, but I'm struggling. I'm doing what you did when I was looking for Claude Julien's name. I'm trying to buy time for myself here, and I'm not having any luck.
Okay, well, let me fill in some blanks. This is 2012, and it was Alice Cooper, and he got together with, I'll tell you who they are: Johnny Depp,
Yes.
and Joe Perry, and one other guy. And what they were doing is they wanted to do a tribute to a lot of the musicians who passed away from the drug era back in the 70s. And so they formed this band, and I don't know if they're still doing it or not, because I don't even know if all these guys are still around. But the name of the band that they did, and they toured around for a while, they were called the Hollywood Vampires.
Yeah. I remember it now. And and Jim Morrison was given a huge tribute in that show because Alice was friendly with Morrison. And in one of the interviews I did with Alice, I asked him what it was like hanging with Jim. And he said, it's amazing the guy even made it to 27 because of how wild he was and how he would put anything in his body that would intoxicate him. So yeah, I remember that. I absolutely remember the Hollywood Vampires. I didn't see it, and I've not seen video on it, but I remember reading about it when they were doing it.
I guess YouTube, which has everything else, if you're curious, you could probably find something there. By the way, talking about Jim Morrison, I think one of the great portrayals in a movie history, and I'm a big movie buff, and I know you are as well, was Val Kilmer doing Jim Morrison in the Jim Morrison Story. I don't know if you ever saw that or not, but it was really, really a good portrayal.
Oh, he crushed it as Jim Morrison. Yeah, that brought me back to the Doors because I was a Doors fan as a teenager and shortly after, but I wasn't rabid. After I finally got to the Doors movie, and it was produced in 91, I want to say. I didn't start watching it until this century. I think it was 01 or 02 when I saw it for the first time. I had a renaissance with the Doors. I went out and bought a bunch of, at the time, CDs. I went out and bought Morrison Hotel. I bought their debut album, which is as good as it gets for debut albums. I mean, they start their rock and roll career with Break On Through. That's not a bad way to say hello, is it?
Yeah, talk about Rookie of the Year right off the bat. All right, so we talked about earlier that Alice Cooper's real name is Vincent Fournier. What's his middle name, real middle name?
Oh, I don't know Alice's middle name. I don't know.
It's Damon. Vincent Damon Fournier. So, I mean, it's pretty smart that he changed it ultimately to Alice Cooper. And there's even a story about him changing his name, because the band was Alice Cooper. They disbanded, at least the original members of the Alice Cooper, but he changed his name literally, legally also to Alice Cooper. But because he did, every year he's got to pay out a certain kind of royalty to all the original members of the band because he changed his name legally, which I don't totally understand, but that's been the way for, I don't know, ever since he changed his name legally to Alice Cooper.
Yeah, I didn't know that. A lot of talent has come through those doors to work with Alice. And, 5-6 years ago, I thought he was just blowing smoke at us when he said, this current band I have is just absolutely amazing. And I'm thinking, come on, man, you worked with Glenn Buxton and Dennis Dunaway. You worked with some of the Neil Smith on the drum kit. He had a lot of talent around him, but he wasn't exaggerating. They had a chick playing guitar who was she just crushed it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. His father, Alice Cooper's father. Do you remember what profession he was in?
Was he a salesman, a furniture salesman?
Not exactly. He was a preacher of the Church of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Alice at a young age, or Vincent at a young age, was very much into the church, and they thought for a long time that that's the avenue and path that he was going to go down. And so when he does the song "No More Mr. Nice Guy," and they talk that one part in the song where the preacher or whatever hits him in the nose or something like that, I'm just thinking, did he have his father in mind when he wrote that line in that song?
Oh, that's good. Or from the song Guilty from Goes to Hell. I'm a dirt talking, beer drinking, woman chasing minister's son.
Right.
He was talking about himself.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So, he got into music early. He also played baseball. You know that. He was a pretty good baseball player out in Arizona on the high school team and a golfer, of course. But he started a band, I think, when he was 16 years old. Do you remember his very first band's name?
The Runaways?
No. The very first band's name, and they went to a local Letterman talent show with this band's name, and they were called the Earwigs.
Oh, 17-year-olds under the influence. They come up with some of the really, really cool things, don't
Now,
they?
I'll tell you. Then I guess they busted up or whatever. Then they changed their name. They might have added some people, obviously. Then they became the Spiders. And then ultimately it became Alice Cooper. All right, what was his first number one album? Which one?
Number one album?
I tried to find the number one song, but I couldn't find that. But I found his first number one album.
I'd have to guess School's Out.
Was that the name of an album? I'm not even sure.
That's why I said School's Out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Billion Dollar Babies, according to Wikipedia.
Okay. Makes sense. Billion Dollar Baby had some good tracks on it. Yeah. Really cool inserts, too. That's what you don't get by downloading music. They had these gigantic billion-dollar bills inside the album cover of it. Of course, you get your liner notes, and if publisher is feeling really generous, they may even include some lyrics.
Yeah, 100%. All right, one more on Alice. For a while, and he married somewhere early, and then he divorced, and then he got married again. And he's been with that same woman. I forget what her name is. That's right. And he's been with her for a long time.
I got to prove I know something about this guy.
Well, let's see if you get this one. He was famously linked with an actress who was a bombshell at the time. He
denied this too. And I called bullshit on it when he told me Raquel Welch made passes at him. And he said no, that he was a one-woman man. And when Pete McMurray and I interviewed him in 2016, I said, I'm calling BS on that, Alice. Who can say no to Raquel? He said, swear to God. He goes, I'm guilty of a lot of things. I put a lot of bad things in my body, and, I'm not proud of a lot of things I've done, but that would not be among the things for which I'm guilty.
Yeah, I mean, how can you pass that up? Oh, my God. All right. A couple more here. Now we're going to switch over to fishing. You talked about the muskie. You caught a 50-inch one. What is the world record size, poundage, and inches for a muskie?
Well, there's debate about this.
I saw that.
Did you see the story about I'm not pulling his name either. There was a guy who admitted to putting sand in a fish that once was weighed and given the it was officially recorded as the largest muskie ever boated, the heaviest muskie. On his deathbed, the guy admitted to weighing the fish down with about 2 pounds of sand. That's what he confesses on his deathbed. Not all the people he's wronged in the world. Not all the anything you'd like to say before you meet God. Get your conscience clean. Yeah, I weighed down that muskie. 69 pounds. Are you looking for the one that's presently located in Wisconsin?
I think that's 65, if I'm not mistaken. But you're right. The world record, and it was going back to 1949. Some guy in Ohio, and I don't know where he boated the fish. That was the one that was 69 pounds, 11 ounces, measuring 72 inches. It's unfathomable.
Yeah, the biggest muskie I ever boated was 52 and a half inches, and I've seen them estimated in the upper 50s. I've never seen anything outside of 5 feet. I've never seen a 60-inch fish in the water. But man, that's crazy. That's in a different era. And I bet that fish was caught in a river in New York.
Could be. I mean, I saw it yesterday on Wikipedia again. By the way, have you ever fished up at in Hayward, Wisconsin, which is known as the muskie capital up there?
Yeah, that's the bar I was trying to. I think it's called the Moccasin Bar. Is where one of those fish is. And I don't know if they killed the fish or they did a replica of it. I encourage people, please do a replica. Don't kill a fish for its skin. If you're going to eat the fish, fine, but don't kill it for trophy. Have a replica. Take measurements. There's all kinds of great taxidermists out there right now who do replicas. If you saltwater graze taxidermy down in Florida, for freshwater in the Hayward area, Lax Taxidermy, LAX, would be the best way to go.
Okay, two more. So we talked about supposedly the world record muskie is 69 pounds. How about the world record northern pike?
Oh. I'm going to guess somewhere around 50, 51 pounds.
Pretty damn close. Supposedly 55 pounds. That's a big effing fish. Because I told you, my friend's father, and when he netted that 26-pounder, it was in a cove. Like it was like he just was trolling, or not trolling. He was just casting out in a little cove, and the thing just took off. It took off, and then we had an Indian guide from way up northern Canada. Foolishly, he put the net in front of the thing. Like within the first minute or two, it went right through the damn net. So we had to clobber it, to be honest with you, and finally bring it in. But 55 pounds, I can't even imagine, because this 26-pound one, there you go. There's some good pictures right off the bat right there.
Yeah, that is quite a belly on that fish. I have caught a lot of nice northern pike. I've caught a lot of really good eating size northern pike, but I have yet to enter the 40-inch club with northerns, and both of my sons are there. Several of my buddies are there. I've got a half a dozen 39 and a halves, probably a half a dozen 39s and 38s, but I am yet to get to that 40-inch mark with northerns.
You will. I can almost promise you. All right, one last one. World record walleye, and I can't imagine this one either, but what do you think the world record walleye is?
Well, based on the way you've shaped it, it's going to be bigger than any walleye we've ever heard of being caught around here.
Yeah.
35 pounds?
Supposedly 29 pounds, which is 41 inches. I can't even imagine a walleye that big. It would almost be like a fatso walleye, to be honest with you, because the walleyes that we were catching, and you've caught them up too, probably in Canada, 6, 7, 8 pounds, maybe 9 once in a great moon. You know, I think this, at some point they get too big. I don't even know if they would taste that good, to be honest.
No, anything outside of the slot, which in most provinces is 18 to 24 inches, probably best to release if the fish survives, and hopefully you take good care of your fishermen, when you catch these things. Don't abuse them. Don't slap them around. Get them back in the water quickly, and after you take a picture with them. When I see big walleye behind the glass at a grocery store, I shake my head. It's like, no, those fish are 27, 28 inches long. The meat it's not spoiled meat, but it's not nearly as good and mild as the smaller ones. I think the perfect size walleye to eat are 14, 15, 16 inches. The biggest one I ever caught, I caught him while fishing for muskie. So I was mildly disappointed because I'm fishing for big toothy critters, and I caught a 31.5-inch walleye that weighed almost 12 pounds.
That's a big fish.
Yeah, 11 pounds and 10 ounces. I weighed her, got her back in the water real quickly. Not disappointed when I show people the picture of it. And it was cold weather fishing in Canada too. I'm all bundled up and big old ass smile on my face with that 31.5-inch walleye.
Hey, Danny, did you ever do smelt fishing back in the day on Lake Michigan?
I never did. It looks like something that would, if you don't know what you're doing, could drive you to insanity real quickly.
Yeah.
I like to eat smelt.
Oh, fantastic. Yummy.
Yeah, they're good. They're tasty. I don't even know what the Lake Michigan population is, if they even have one for smelt anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if they do. And this is back in the day. And yeah, you had to have special equipment. You had to have what I think were called gill nets or something like that. And you throw it down there and you put the light on the water and you just bring it up. It was almost like crab fishing, if you will. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was with some friends who were very avid fishermen that you would get along with famously. And we were 16, 17, 18 years old. So all we were really doing was drinking beer and, having fun, if you will.
Well,
Back in the day.
I've heard that the muskie population on Lake Michigan is beginning to slowly migrate south.
Interesting.
And that prospect tickles the hell out of me because I know it's great near Green Bay. The Lake Michigan, near Green Bay, there are some tremendous muskie holes in the islands and in some of the coves. I've not done this yet, but that's going to change this year. I guess there was a muskie. I don't know if it was Montrose Harbor this year or if it was up just a little bit more north in Winthrop Harbor, right near the Wisconsin line. But there was a muskie of some note, plus 40 inches, caught in Lake Michigan water. So if they can keep coming south, that'd make me quite happy.
You know, when my son was younger and I wanted to replicate a trip that my father took with me, and we didn't go up to Canada, maybe someday we will, but we went up we went up through Wisconsin, then we crossed over and we were in Lake Michigan, but it was in Escanaba, Michigan, I think is what it's called. And we were catching lake trout up there back at that time. So yeah, I mean, some of those fish are going to start migrating further down south. I mean, we used to go coho fishing all the time back on, when we were 16, 17, 18 years old on Lake Michigan. That was a hoot also. It's a passion. You have to have patience, like you said earlier, because you can go sometimes 2 or 3 times in a row and not catch anything. But when you finally snag your first one, and especially a nice size fish, it's pretty cool.
Coho is an extremely underrated eating fish. And they don't have to be big. And I don't do it anymore. When I was just starting to fish in my late teens, and my dad used to take me out on the boat to go drown crickets and minnows for bluegill and crappie. But when I started to get out on my own, we used to fish the warm water discharges on Lake Michigan on the southern end near the steel mills. And the coho fishing in the late winter, early spring is tremendous. And they don't have to be real big. You get those fish in the 14 to 20 inch range, 2 or 3 pounders. They are tremendous. And I'd smoke a bunch of them and make a smoked coho salmon salad and take them to the guys at the Score in the early 90s. I made about a 10-pound tub of that stuff one day and brought in a couple of loaves of rye bread. And Seth Mason was so tickled to have something healthy from one of his air personalities.
Those are the good old days, obviously. And you're whetting my appetite to go fishing and play golf with you, and maybe even see another Alice Cooper concert before we're both long gone. Hopefully it all happens.
Hey, if Alice hits Chicago this year, and I've not looked at his site lately, I don't know if there are any plans already inked. But I am absolutely down for that, and I would be happy to teach you how to hit a 3-iron longer than you do. But yeah, when the weather breaks and given continued improvement from physical therapy with my neurological issues, I hope to see you on the golf course in May or June.
It's a date, Danny. Hey, I appreciate you joining us tonight. Again, if you want to follow Danny, you can catch him on Twitter at DannyMac2021. And of course, is it Fridays for a couple of hours on WJOB also?
Yeah, every Friday, 2 hours, WJOB. Suburban radio doesn't suck like it did years ago because of the TuneIn app. You can listen anywhere in the world for free on the TuneIn app, so I don't have to deal with that. My listeners in the city can jump on board, and it's also on demand at Jed TV, on Twitter at Jed, Jed TV. WJOB noon to 2 on Fridays, and we have just re-upped. We are doing another 6 months. thanks to our title sponsor, Bet Rivers, for coming on board. So I thought it was just going to be a football season deal, David, but they want us to keep going. So,
well, that a smart move on their part. And also, is your book still in the process?
yeah, it's in the process. I have 2 books in the process. They're both half finished. I started one in 2012 or 2013 about Patrick's autism, my middle son, Patrick, 28 now, and what his autism did to change my life and how it challenged me and his brothers, his mom, and what his unique challenges were. I wrote about half of that, and after the Score fired me in September of 20, was it 20? Yeah, September of 20, I started my radio book, which I'd been keeping notes on, saving text messages, emails that are evil in nature over the years. That book is half done. Maybe I should just slap them together and say, you guys figure it out.
Yeah, well, listen, I'll read them both, but I can't wait for the one on radio because I know you and I know you're going to have some good stuff in that book for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna swing from the heels because that's the only way I know how.
Listen, hang on a second. I'm going to say goodnight to the audience, but hang on one second. So again, Alan, if you can end this broadcast, we appreciate everybody listening in. I'm going to take next Sunday off because it's a Super Bowl, and I intend on being semi-inebriated while watching the game, or maybe more than semi. I don't know. Anyway, hang on one second, Danny, and we'll say goodnight to the audience.
All right.
Thank you for listening to 1252 Sports Chicago.